Hello, world, and welcome to the Innovation Coaching Podcast. My name is Klaus Hostel, and with me today I have Ashley King Nizzle. I love that last name. Ashley, tell me how I can help.
Well, so I started my company, Teams Rising, about a year and a half ago. It was born out of getting fired of my job of 17 years. And I got fired on a Friday. And Saturday, I was sitting on my couch, and everyone everyone had found out at that point. And I was getting text messages and all these wonderful notes from coworkers and friends. And they were all sending the same message of, Ashley, we believe in you. You got this, very encouraging. And so it was a Saturday that I started receiving these messages. And Saturday evening, I got off my butt and I went to a local university that was having a football game. And because I decided that very moment, I wanted to start living the life that I truly wanted to live. And I already had this idea for my company, Teams Rising, in my head, which was to work primarily with athletic teams and athletic departments and to support their team wellness journeys. And so the day after I got let go, I started building my company. And so here I am a year and a half later. It's been this amazing journey of learning about myself. I never imagined I would be an entrepreneur. I never imagined myself in the foreground. I'm an excellent backgrounder. It's really the place where I'm most comfortable. But I'm really passionate about the work that I do. And life brought me to this place. It kind of called me out and called me in. And so I'm leaning into it, but I have a lot to learn. And so I guess that's where we meet. I think I figured out that I'm a really good programmer. I'm very creative, but now it's this business part. It's okay, you got to shore up the business. You got to figure out how to actually make some money. Let's make it sustainable. So here we are.
I like that. And I also love that from you tend to spend a bit of time in the Western part of the world, being an American, and that I got fired on Friday. On Saturday, I got messages, and then on Monday, I was doing my own business. But that's awesome, right? That's the good America. We love that. So thank you for showing this is how you do change. I love that. Now, the business side of it, what's working and what's not? Like what is work, what is already, oh, this is going great. And which parts are like, yeah, maybe this could be better.
Yeah, so I have realized I am excellent at relationship building. I'm excellent at developing programs. Honestly, it took me a year to figure this out. All the work that I've gotten so far is based on relationships, based on having conversations, even from people I didn't know, but then just built those conversations and built that trust. It literally took me a year to realize I'm not doing any other marketing, literally none. I don't even have, SEO figured out on my website. I made my own website. It looks fine, but there's nothing behind it. And I thought, oh my gosh, why did it take me a year to figure out there's lots more ways to market what I'm doing than build a relationship. Build a relationship is my favorite, but it takes time. And so there's other ways. So I need to be mindful of that and then figure out what are those best ways. I don't know.
Uh-huh. Okay, so let's tackle that at a moment. So you say so far most of the work you've gotten, if not all of it, has come from relationships that you've built.
Yep.
How many of them have been built since you made the company, and how many of them are like, oh, I've known Jeff for 20 years already?
Literally all of them. So in the past, this is a completely new field. I didn't work in the field of universities or athletics before. And so now I will say those 6 months before I got let go, I saw the writing on the wall. So I'd started developing contacts, but so all these contacts are within the past 2 years.
Oh, oh, so this.
Yeah. So they are recent. This is definitely my lane. I love meeting people and making those connections. And I could literally live here all day. I mean, I could all day talking to people, but I don't think it's most effective. It's definitely effective long term.
Aha, right? So then, okay, so if we say that, if we say it's definitely effective long term, you enjoy doing it, those are two good like check marks to make as a possibility. Then the question is, are you getting in enough business right now that you could keep building relationships that work for you long term because you've got enough in the short term, or are you like, I could see this working, but then it's going to be a tough 2 years, or where are we on that?
Yeah, that's the thing. I can see this working. It's just going to take way longer than I would like.
Got it.
So, yeah.
And Are you comfortable talking a number or two? It doesn't have to be precise, just to give us a rough scale, or would you rather keep it vague?
It's what the company's earned, it's barely enough to sustain me, and I have 2 children. So
Got it. And they cost money. We know.
they do, as it turns out. Yeah.
It's like tornadoes. They destroy and cost money.
And I'm in the Midwest, so we know these things.
So you know these things, right? Tornado country.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess what I'm alluding to here is if you know this is a sustainable long-term strategy, but the lead-in times are simply too long, right? So if somebody came down and plunked $200,000 in front of you and said, "Hey, Ashley, this is your reserve. This is your war chest. Keep doing what you're doing. The first year is going to be tough. The second will be better. And the third, then we're at break even. And from year four, all those relationships, those snowballs will have started snowballing. And from then on, you're golden. But we need to get you there." Is that apt, except you don't have that 200,000 just lying on the table?
Accurate. Yes.
Got it. Okay. So first suggestion is keep doing what you're doing, because one of the things that is hardest in business is two things. One is building something long term, and the second is building something short term. But often it's tempting to sacrifice one for the other, right? The simplest model is if you steal from somebody, it is probably very good short term, but very bad long term. If we take that in a little bit less of a criminal thing, then it's if you borrow money from people you trust, that is short term, very, very good, right? You're literally getting money from them. If you don't pay them back, it's not good long term. Because not only will they say, actually, you borrowed $2,000, where are they? Yeah, it was a good short term decision. They're like, yeah, I get that, but now give them back to me. You've also now turned a friend into an enemy. So from a short-term perspective, cheating people, being dishonest, being a grifter is very smart short-term. The problem is it has long-term consequences that none of us want to. If we leave aside the moral issue, it's simply long-term bad for business, right? This is why long-term success usually is also things like good customer service and adapting to who you're serving. Where short-term, you can make money out of more or less anything. The problem is, will the same people come back? Will they recommend you? Or to put it in tourist terms, if there is a restaurant with a beautiful view, don't expect the cooking to be good, because the tourists come there and then they pay for the food. And even if they're not coming back, they paid already. Now, that's the old mantra. With the internet and it's easier to check things, things have changed a bit. But keep doing the long-term stuff. Keep meeting those people, not full-time, not all the time, because you also need a short-term strategy. But if you have a working long-term strategy, building relationships, and out of those comes business, keep on doing that. Do not stop doing that, would be my first piece of advice.
Okay.
Does that resonate? Does it sound terrible?
No, absolutely. I enjoy it, and it makes sense to me. It is the most logical way to build a business to me.
Yes. Okay. So we're good on that. Then the next part is, okay, so now the long-term strategy is set and it's something you enjoy doing, it's something that's meaningful. What do we do short-term until the fruits of that kick in, right? You're planting seeds in the garden, they're going to be beautiful palm trees, but it's going to take a while. How do you get to keep the land until those trees sprout? The first one, which is a simple tactic, may or may not be relevant, but a simple tactic is simply going for smaller fish, right? Let's say I do a lot of coaching. I tend to be a not too cheap coach, let's put it that way. But if I want to make money by doing coaching, the easiest thing I can do is go out and say, hey, all you lovely people, how many of you would like some coaching from me but can't really afford it? And then somebody raises their hand, and let's say 20 people say yes to that. They say, good. Would you be up for it if I slashed my prices 50%? And then some of them would say, I still can't afford it because you're still overpriced, Klaus, but 80%, and then we might talk. And some would say, oh, 50%, then I'm in. Now, these are if we're taking people who trust me already. If we're taking people who've never heard of me and say, Klaus, why are you charging $900 for a coaching session? That seems insane. And I say, I could do it for $150. That's not going to build trust. That's just going to make me seem weird. And that means that you can do this if it's people where the only thing holding them back is the price. If there's people who already trust you, already want what you have, but they simply can't afford it because their budgets don't fit, or they simply don't have the money, then a short-term strategy can be to do work that is discounted, but for people who want the real thing, they just can't afford it, right? I don't know what your rates are. I don't know how you're structured. I don't know how your pricing works. We could dive more into that. But if you went out tomorrow and talked to people who are already maybe interested, maybe kind of in your trust pile, and said, hey, I'm doing to bring in some cash short term while working on long term stuff, I'm doing for the next half year, the rest of 2024, I'm doing what I do at half price. Would you be interested in that? Or is price not what's holding you back? That will, of course, make you suddenly cheaper, which you may not want to be, but it definitely will also take some of those who want to hire you. That suddenly makes you more attractive, not necessarily to people who don't know you, because suddenly you've just jumped a price level and maybe they don't want that. But to the people who are just like, oh, we want her, we just don't have the money, suddenly the half price is more interesting.
Okay, I like that, and I like how you just described your approach with them, because in terms of saying, being upfront, for the next 6 months, I'm going to do this to gain more clientele. Because my question was going to be, how do you frame it without devaluing
Mm-hmm.
your work, and then knowing that, well, ultimately we know that that's not the real price. So I want to, stay transparent as much as you can, while we're retaining that trust.
And that is one of the hard things in pricing. How do you say it cost $100 or $10,000, but here's a discount without losing credibility? How do you both get that lower paying, which they might be able to afford, without losing credibility and pissing off the people who pay full price? Now we get to the framing question. So let's start by an example. You are right now on a podcast that is a coaching podcast. What have you paid to be here?
Nothing.
Nothing, of course, right? You also know I do coaching. Do you think I charge zero when I do coaching?
No.
No. So both of these things, both Klaus the paid coach, we're not going to talk about rates, but we could, and also Klaus the free coach, both of those exist in the same universe. And one does not necessarily disqualify the other, as long as it's understandable. Here it's pretty easy, right? You're on the podcast, you're also helping create content for me, and you're helping me grow my kind of presence in the world. And it might even be nice. You might even learn something or have something that you change your mind on, or at least say, Klaus is wrong. Now I know what to do. So there might even be some effect of it. But it's easy to understand for anyone, hey, I do a coaching podcast where people are on for free. I also do paid coaching, which is not free. Those are easy to understand for most people. So I can do both at the same time, right? The free podcast does not detract from the paid coaching because everybody understands the difference. If I went out and said, I do coaching, I charge $400 for a session. Let's just say that's the price. And on Wednesdays and Thursdays, I do it for free. Then most people would say, then I'd like a time on Wednesday or Thursday, please. And they would also probably say, why are you, well, that doesn't make sense to me. And I say, yeah, this is because, and then I need a reason, because if I don't have a reason, it's going to be weird. And if I also, even worse is if I say, I charge $400 per session, and you say, okay, I might be interested. Okay, but I don't have a lot of money. I could do it for 30. It's like, but you just were at 400 and now you're saying 30. I have a feeling now that in really you're a $30 coach, not a 400, but you want to pretend you're a 400 because then you think that you might get more people at 30. Where the reality is, I'd probably have better luck saying I charge $30 a session and get that instead of trying to kind of boost it. And we live in a world where there's a lot of, especially like small entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and so on, who try to inflate their numbers as a way of positioning. And as long as nobody notices, it's fine. But when people start noticing, then it's tricky, right? You probably know people who are like You ask them, what do you charge for a day's workshop or something? They say, oh, I charge $2,000. Like, oh, great. And you do a lot of workshops? Yeah, I do 10 a month. Oh, so you're making $20,000 a month? That's amazing, Matt. And you say, then you can maybe pay for your part of this year's ski trip that I normally pay for you. And Matt's like, yeah, maybe not. It's like, but what happened to the 20,000? Yeah, maybe I actually only got one client who paid 2,000, and that was back in 2019, and most of them pay 100. Oh, okay. So you're masquerading as a $2,000 workshopper, but in reality, you're a $100. And that's not good. That does not build trust unless there's a reason. So the key is either stick with what you have, either stick with the price, either say, I'm a $100 workshop guy, or I'm a $10,000 workshop guy, and that's the price or that range. Or if you have variety or flexibility, make sure there's a reason. It's Belgian National Day. Okay, that can work once a year, but best if you're Belgian. It works less well if it's just randomly, ta-da, it's Belgian National Day, you get a discount and you get a discount, because then it seems more like a sales tactic than an actual thing. But you could say, a lot of people say, for nonprofits, I work at half rates. Okay. Or have a reason, right? As long as you have a reason. I do something pretty radical. And that is when people contact me for speaking, I do quite a lot of public speaking. And I say, what's your budget? I do some speaking that's at $10,000 for a talk. I do some that's at zero. I do some that's at 2,000. I do some that's at 5,000. What's your budget? That's what we're going to go for, because you're not going to get more money just because I'm more expensive. And I'm not doing it for the money, but I will take what money you have. And this is me trusting them to have my best interest at heart, because they can easily say, lovely, we're going to pay you zero. Great. Or say, oh, it says 10,000 in our budget, but let's just remove a zero. This guy's obviously not a negotiator. Let's tell him 1,000, and then he's happy. And then I say, you've got 1,000. That's great. But that's because I treat it as a long-term relationship and am willing to get screwed over, because most people don't do that.
Okay. So leading with what's your budget? Is that a leading, or first redoing the having a reason for discounting it?
Well, the key thing is whether you do one or the other or something else, is as long as they understand why you're doing it.
Okay.
If you go help a stranger and say, hey, you remind me of my mother, and I miss her, I'd like to help you with your grocery shopping. Let me carry your bags. Then you don't come off as a weirdo. You come off as a very sweet person. If you come over and say, let me help you with your bags, then you might come off as a nice person. If you go over to a random person and say, hey, here's $1,000, then they're going to look for the hidden cameras, because it's not obvious what's in it for you. And if we don't trust what's in it for the other person, we start asking questions, and we trust less because it seems weird, right? Where if we understand why, what's their alibi, what's the reason, then we can accept strangers giving us Ferraris in the street. But if they try to do it without, we're going to look for what's the catch, what's going on, right? What's wrong with this picture? And pricing is the same.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. So I'm thinking, in the United States, colleges are typically tiered D1, D2, D3, meaning basically the resources available to them. And so D2 and D3 have fewer resources typically. And so I could see maybe 4 D2 schools, D3 schools offering workshops at a certain rate, knowing that they don't have as many resources available.
Bingo. And as long as the reason, as long as the alibi, the framing makes sense to the person you're talking to or selling to, it can be anything. It can be very simple. It can be, oh, I went to Dartmouth when I was in college, so I'm offering workshops to the sports team here at 1/3 of my normal price because this is my old alma mater. Everybody understands that. If you're saying, I have this thing, I'm part of this coaching program where part of our learning is to learn to give away. So every month I give away 2 free days of consulting work, and I do it on a first come, first served basis. Are you interested in one of those days? If not, no problem, I'll call somebody else. That's a very different thing from somebody calling you and say, normally I charge $20,000 because I'm very, very cool and experienced and efficient. But for you especially, I'd like to do it for 79. You've seen these offers, right? This like classic sales funnel value 7,900, but today only 129. It's like nobody buys it. It's not that it can't work, but nobody believes it. Where if you said, hey, this is normally we sell this at 7,900, but during the month of July, we're doing a summer discount because our business is slow, so we're selling it at 10% discount. Anybody will believe that, right? Because summers are slow and we're trying a thing and they're letting us have it cheaper because they could use some more business. I just myself signed up for a coaching program with a Danish coach who's an expert on selling webinars, and he wrote out, hey, I normally don't do this, but business is slow, so I'm taking on some free coaching clients. If you want to be one of them, apply here. And he's been flooded with applications because he's good.
Hmm.
And it's an easy excuse.
Sure. So almost, I mean, the key is almost, would you say the key is understanding your value, but being flexible enough to understand the market and what you need to do to.
Yes. Yes. Very simply put, right? If you understand your value, but most of all, they need to understand your value. If you walk into what's a classic engagement for you? What is it like? $18,000 or 400 or what's a classic invoice you send out?
It could be for like a $2,500 workshop or a $10,000 retreat.
Sure. Let's say the $10,000 retreat. If you talk to somebody and say, hey, I have a $10,000 retreat. Are you interested? If they believe it's a $10,000 retreat, then it's a serious conversation. If they believe it's actually a $300 retreat that you're pumping the value on because you're ready to discount it as a tactic, then that's not going to be a good conversation. If they think it's a $15,000 workshop, they think they're getting a great deal. If it seems like it's a $50,000 workshop and you're offering it at 10, they're going to be suspicious. Barack Obama will be speaking. You can bring 20 people from your staff. It costs $10,000. And you're thinking, I'm not going to pay this woman until I've met Barack Obama here because this seems like a scam. Even if you got him, even if it's real, because the trust isn't there. And you're not signaling trust with your price. Where if you're saying, we do this sports camp and Barack Obama will come and teach you how to do high-level negotiations and motivate teams, it has a price tag of $67,000 for sending 2 people from your school. And yes, that's a lot, but we're only doing this for 20 people. Then they do the math and think, oh, 600, okay, that seemed like Barack Obama level, right? Because it's believable. And if you say, and we have 100 people coming to this event, but we're offering 5 free tickets, and the way we're doing it is that or 5 discount, the way we're doing it is that we're calling people based off institutions in our local area. And you're one of those. Okay, well, that makes sense. It's about understanding them and making sure they understand your logic.
Okay. Yeah.
Because then it builds trust.
Right. And then that plays into the whole long-term relationship building piece that we're going for, of course.
Bingo, because then you're not sacrificing the long term for the short term. You can still be the person who does the $10,000 retreats, even if this one you sold it for 7, as long as they understand why you sold it for 7. Or if you just say it costs 10 and I'm selling it for 7 and the conversation hasn't even started, that's not trust building. That's shady. That's like, okay, this is bullshit. And that's not good.
Right. And that is such a beautiful insight, right? Because on the surface, it's the same, from 10 to 7 over here, 10 to 7 over here. But the reasoning makes all the difference.
Bingo.
One encourages trust, one questions me. And it's just, you're to shut down them. Why would you do that as a business person, right? Like, we need to understand why would that make sense to you?
Yes. And we have it, the College of Extraordinary Experiences, where we both know that. So I can use that as an easy example. People sign up and they choose their own price. And there are 3 price points and they choose. And we often have people ask us, why would anyone choose anything but the lowest? And we say, well, it's because if you choose a higher price point and you can afford it, it allows us to let more people in at the lower price point. So you get to have bigger diversity of people from different economic situations. And then a lot of them say, Ah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, I can afford the middle tier or the high tier, so I'll do that. And some of them say, great, then I'm going to take the cheapest one, but that's fine, right? Because it still works. Where if everybody just said, yeah, you guys are obviously idiots that know nothing, I'll take the cheapest one, then we might just change that. But as it is, it works quite well because we're placing trust in them, and then they're thinking this is a long-term thing. And they understand because we give them the reason. We say, it's so we can have a more diverse participant group also economically. And that means if everybody is charged the same, then that's going to lead to less diversity, which is also, we have some free tickets because we want to have people there who could never even afford to be there, even at the lower price, but we still want some of them. And somebody else has to pay for that. Can you do that? And then a lot of people say, yeah, I like that. That's the event I want to go to. Where if we just said, here's the ticket price and there's discounts, then some people will go, why this seems weird, right? This is strange. This is suspicious because I don't understand why.
Yeah, the college's model for pricing was the first time I'd ever seen that. But it resonated with me because I understood. I understood what you were going for. And I appreciated that, certainly in my position, having just lost my job and starting a business. So I was one person who absolutely took advantage of that opportunity because I never would have been able to experience that. And being able to go there, so what's the word? Paradigm shifting for me because I never in my life had imagined that I could travel internationally by myself. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. I live in the United States. I'm very comfortable traveling in the country, but I don't know another language. And I just thought that's a barrier for me, and that's just how it is. And I saw the opportunity arise and had enough courage to say, well, maybe because the opportunity was provided. And I did it. And then first of all, making that trip across the pond, doing that spoke so much to me on every level, personally, professionally, to know that I could do that. That was within me. And then to be there and to meet all the people who were there, to think now, oh my gosh, I literally now have friends across the world. I think that was so profound to know that literally across the globe, I now am connected with people. And so I absolutely, that resonated with me, how you did that. And clearly to me, it's evidence of your values aligning with how you wanted to run your business. Am I overstepping here or is that accurate?
No, it's very accurate. And ironically, it also has the flip side effect of leading to more people choosing a price point that is higher because they understand and it resonates with them. And to me, this is actually practice that I started more than 15 years ago in my old role-playing business, because we had so many people who called us and said, hey, we want to do a role-playing thing, but we're not really sure what it is, and we don't know what it costs. What's on your menu? And since they didn't understand what they were buying, and they didn't understand what it was worth, and they didn't know how to price it, they didn't know how to value it. They had no idea if I said it cost $4,000, they would have no idea, is this cheap or expensive, because they had nothing to compare with. So they were asking me a question, and what they were really looking for was, we have some money, can you help us? And I found that at some point, pretty fast, I started changing my replies, and then I started saying, let's do it differently. Most of our customers anyway have a budget. What's your budget? Because if you tell me your budget, then I'll tell you what that budget will buy you. How much can you get here? We're not going to price the items, but I'll tell you what you can get from that budget, and we'll do something that works as good as it can for you within your budget. And then when I said 80% of our customers do this anyway, because they don't know, they know they have 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000, but they don't know what they can get for it. So it ends up with this anyway. So why don't we just skip to you telling me your budget? And then I'll say, hey, we can do this. Is that good? And so many of them said, oh, that's so nice, because honestly, I had no idea what I was looking for. I just knew I wanted something. We have $3,000 or we have $10,000. And I said, great. Here's what I suggest. Does that work for you? And they said, yeah, can we get that for this money? That sounds lovely. And in this conversation, I've had this so many times. And when I talk to people who were kind of in traditional sales, a lot of them would say, they would say one of two things. Either they would say, oh, that's nice. that's trust building and working together and finding common ground, or they would say, why would they tell you their budget? Nobody would tell you why. I don't believe they told you their budget, because then they couldn't negotiate properly. And the whole difference is, are you going from we're working together and trust each other? Then that's a good tactic. If it's a more transactional, you're trying to get the lowest price possible, then it's a really bad tactic, because then they would say, oh, we have 2,000. I'd come up with something with 2,000. They'd say yes to that. And then they'd secretly think, we had 4, but we got a great deal. And as long as you know which way you're going, either works, right? You can either do the trust building, and when you do the long-term relationship stuff, that comes naturally, right? If it's Jack you've known for 12 years, and Jack now wants a proposal for you to do a retreat or a workshop, then he knows that you're not going to try to bullshit him, and you know he's not going to try to bullshit you. But if it's somebody new, then there's a choice. Do you go into this with trust as your default, or do you go into this with transaction as your default? Both can work, but they're very different. And as long as you know which one you're doing, then it's good. And sometimes you do it differently, right? Sometimes you go out and say, it costs $17.99. Take it or leave it.
How do you determine, is it just a sense or feel you get? How do you determine if it's a transactional or conversational?
Well, I would say that the smartest thing to do is to decide it decide what you're doing generally, and then see if that works or not. And if it doesn't, then maybe change tactic. Right? I once had a negotiation with, Paul and I were doing a project, also Phil, one of our early works, we were doing a project in the Arab Emirates, in the Middle East. And we had this conversation with them about royalties and so on. And I remember saying in that call, we think between 5 and 10% would be a fair amount of like royalty payments for us, for like the ticket sales, like that would be our cut. But that would be a range that we think would be reasonable. But for us, it's not a cardinal point. And if necessary, if this is what it takes, we are prepared to go all the way down to 0% royalties if needed, because we understand this can be tricky, and then solve it otherwise. Then the other person at the other end says, great, 0%, moving on. And that, because they just saw, oh, this guy's just an idiot. Let's just move on and ignore. And that, of course, was somebody treating it like a short-term thing. Now, if you get that on every call, then it's a bad tactic. On the other hand, if you always go in the classic, like, the price is $5 per item, and it's never going to be any lower, and then they say, could you do $4.50? No, $5. I'm a hard negotiator. Then you might get it. But you can also be sure that when you call them and say, hey, the product's a little bit delayed because new legislation in Argentina has impacted us, they're going to say, hey, remember you and your bullshit, the price is $5 and you didn't have any flexibility? Well, now it's our turn. Suckers. Do what it says in the contract or pay up, right? And that transactions are good if you are okay with being transactional. And sometimes it's one, sometimes, as long as you know what you're going to. And I would suggest, from the way you're doing your business, because you're building relationships, then I think that for you, the trusting a bit too much approach will work better than trusting a bit too little, even if it's going to burn you. Even if you're going to end up with some people taking advantage of you, some people being a bit dishonest, some people thinking, we can just get a good deal off her. She doesn't understand anything. Let's just milk this onion for all it's worth. And onions are not that milkable, so we're not getting a lot out of that. It was not my best joke. But as long as you're building a relationship with the others, then I think that as long as you don't have too many misses, then you can afford to have some. Especially because that's what falls natural, that comes naturally to you anyway, right? You're a relationship builder. And that's about viewing it as a work together, a win-win, instead of a zero-sum game.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I assume this gives us the opportunity to determine, basically our profit margins. So we kind of understand, all right, they have this amount. I'm willing to do it for this because I know I'll make X from it.
Yes. And as long as you're willing to walk away, then that's good, right? The only thing that's dumb is if you go to somebody and say, hey, that $10,000 workshop, I know you have tight budgets. We can do it for $6 if needed. And they say, oh, that's really nice. $6, well, then I can get it past my boss. Let's do it for $6. And then you go home and think, those cheapskates. Anything less than 8 is an insult. Then don't suggest 6, right? It's so as long as you can live with what you're offering, then it's real. Then it's good, even if it sometimes leaves money on the table because you didn't know if it was there or not. And by the way, you're in the long-term business, so you're okay with sacrificing short-term profit to build long-term relationships because that's how you work. That's what comes natural. Where if you're the one who goes home and every time you paid a bit more than you felt you should, or whatever it is, and you feel like, oh, I'm angry because I could have gotten 50% more off that per item thing, then that's not a good tactic. Then it's probably better to have the more transactional approach because it's going to eat you up that you feel you're being taken advantage of.
Sure.
So it's also about how are you as a person? What resonates with you, as long as you don't get caught in the middle, because that leads to unhappiness on all fronts.
Right. I was wondering, have you ever had a situation where you priced it one way for this person and it made logical sense and you were upfront about why, but someone else knew about it and knew that they paid something else? Have you ever had that happen, and how did you navigate?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you've been at the college. People at the college know they pay different amounts because we're very open about it. I'm very open. I stand on stages. I've stood on a stage in France, in Lille, at the first gathering of the French immersive industry, and I was invited to be the closing keynote speaker. And I said, hey, Francis, you invited me here. How much did you pay me to be here? 0. Did you pay for my flights? No. Did you pay for my hotel? No. The reason I can be here is because somebody else is paying me a lot of money when I speak. And that makes me able to afford to speak here for free and pay my own way. And the reason I do that is because I have differentiated pricing. And sometimes I do things where people pay a lot, and sometimes I do things where they pay very little. And I'm very open about that. And that means that I both have very high, or at least to me, at least quite high paying customers. And I have some that pay nothing, and they are aware of each other because I'm open about it. Where if I tried to hide it, it would work fine until somebody found out.
Have you always done this model, or you kind of felt it out as you built your business?
I've done this for my speaking, I've done it for more or less forever. For other stuff I've done, I've had different models for different things. Some events I've done, my old role-playing company, we used to do these big international role-playing events, and there was a price and you can pay it or not, right? It costs 480 euros to be a vampire in Poland for 4 days. Take it or leave it. Oh, but I can only afford 400. Great. Save up and come to the next one. And others have said, okay, well, we'll be flexible. And I think part of it is, are you selling something that where you want to do it, even if there's no money, then you can afford to be flexible on money. Or even if there's little money, are you selling something where you really don't want to do it, where the money is the compensation, then don't be flexible, right? And there are some things I do today that if they don't pay me, I'm not going to do it because I'm doing it for the money. But most of the work I do, and this is, of course, a luxury problem, most of the work I do, I would do even if I didn't get paid. And that means that I say yes before I know what the money is. You can ask any number of people I work with, even ones who've paid me very nicely, and I say yes, and then I ask for the price. Because then I say, now I'll take the money if it's there. If it's not there, then I'll do it for no money. Because my motivation is not the money, though I would, of course, rather have the money than not, but that's not why I'm doing it. And it means that when the money isn't there or something goes wrong, I don't get demotivated. And of course, I can only afford to do this because enough people say, oh, that's really nice to work with. Here's our budget. If all of them said, great, here's nothing, then I would need to do something else or I couldn't afford it. I'm just lucky enough that I have enough people who see me as a partner instead of somebody to be taken advantage of, that I can afford to have this model. And not everyone can.
So I would gather probably more often in the beginning, you're doing more free engagements or low cost engagements than at this point, or is it still just depend?
No, I do more free work today. But my ticket price for the paid work is very different than it was 10 years ago, right? It's when I speak at events, it is not uncommon that, and some people will feel this is low, some will feel it's high, but it's not uncommon that I get paid $10,000 or more to speak at an event. And to me, that's a significant amount of money. For some, it might be pocket change. Good for you. For others, it might be like insane, he's lying. But that's the reality. But it also means I do plenty of work that's free, partly because it doesn't take a lot of those $10,000 gigs to bring in a decent amount of income to support the life I have and the debt I'm paying off. So I do more free work now than I did earlier of that sort. And that's because when I do paid work, it often pays quite nicely.
Okay, that makes sense. Didn't think about it that way, and now that you said it, it's literally mind blown.
And again, we're back to the key is as long as people understand, because if they think I'm trying to cheat them, if they think this is just bullshit, then if I'm like, I always charge $50,000, but you might get it for free, they don't, right? They have to believe that it's not bullshit. And the worst thing I think you can do, and I have some friends who did this many years ago, they produced these monster costumes for role playing. Really good stuff, right? Their craftsmanship was brilliant. And I remember asking, though, that troll suit you made, like, that's really cool. And they said, yeah, it also cost $9,000. I said, wow, that's really nice. That was for them a lot of money, then also for us. And I said, who bought it? I said, oh, no, we haven't sold it, but that's what it would cost if somebody was to buy it. See, yeah, but price doesn't work that way, right? I have any number of lectures that cost €1 million, just haven't sold any. That doesn't mean that I'm suddenly €1 million lecturer because we can all make up that. The really interesting stuff is if I start selling lectures at 100,000 a piece, and that is believable because it happens, then when I go to somebody and say, hey, I'll do it for 20 this time, they say, wow, we're getting a good deal. Where if I just go out and I've never sold it, then that 20 will be like, yeah, you've never sold anything at more than 400. So stop trying to bullshit us. To me, it's all about being open with what model you're using and being willing to take a few hits to learn if the model fits and giving people options, but make sure they're believable options.
Sure. Right. This question is going to sound super petty, and I could probably answer it, but I want to hear what you say. For those like us who travel for work and are, okay, the pricing is a differentiated model. When it comes to travel, do you include that in your, if you say, okay, I'll do it for 5,000, do you include the travel, or is it that plus travel?
I often say, how much do you have? And does that include travel, hotel, or is that a separate budget?
Okay.
So I have plenty of clients who say, really nice, here's 5,000, right? I'm doing a thing not too long that they're paying €5,000 and it's everything included, right? So if I want to live on the street and get there by hitchhiking, fine, that's up to me. I have other clients who say, hey, the hotel, there's a hotel because that's already part of our package. There's already food. And here's what we can afford for the speaking or for the workshop or whatever it is, but then the other stuff comes up on top of it. Then I have another one where they're saying the speaking is for free and we can reimburse travel of up to $1,000. So I take care of my own travel package as long as it doesn't get over what the budget they have. And of course, they're going to be more happy if I get there for 400 than for 800, but they're allowing me to, as long as you're within this reasonable range, you do exactly as you want.
Okay. So it's really not petty, and it is worth the conversation.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
And again, you can say, hey, I'd like to know what can you afford, or here's my price. And you can say that price is excluding flight costs, excluding hotels, excluding food, excluding whatever it is, or it's including everything. And here it's mostly what's easy for them. And the last trick before we round off is one thing I learned many years ago is, it's in our pricing book as well, is the pricing logic they're using. If you can figure that out, you have a much easier time. And by that I mean is that if you're doing an event and they're paying, I did one some years ago, and they were paying for they had this like corporate retreat thing. They were paying for the hotel they were at per person. They were paying for the food per person. They were paying transport per person. So of course, then when they wanted me to do 3 hours workshop, they wanted a per person price. Did I care whether there was 80 people in the room or 110? Not at all, because I built something that worked with either. But I gave them a per person price, and the way I got that was I asked, "Hey, what's your budget?" And they say, "I don't know. said, okay, but last year, what did you do? Well, we did this and this cost 70 euros per person. So I said, okay, so if I can do it at 60 euros per person, will you then be happy? And she said, yeah, then I'm going to be really happy because I'd done the math and saw there were 110 people in the room. So suddenly that was to me a very, very nice piece of money because they were paying per person. Where if I just said, oh, give me this chunk, that was a quite big chunk. But they didn't care about the chunk, they cared about per person because that's what their budget logic was. So figure out how do they want to pay, and is it separate budgets? Do they want to pay with expenses? Do they want to pay? Is it from the marketing budget? Is it from the HR budget? Is it from the development budget? Is it from the equipment budget? Like, what is? Are you selling them the hockey sticks for free, and then or the hockey sticks expensively, but the 2 weeks of training for free, or are you selling the training expensively and the hockey sticks for free? These are the same amount of money coming into you, but one is an equipment budget, another is a training budget. And if you understand their budget logic, then you can fit in where it fits them most comfortably. And that means they're going to be happy with paying you more because they're paying in the right way.
Got it. And builds trust because you're understanding how they work.
And builds trust because you understand and you're trying to make it easy for them. Now, with that, much tempting as it is, whenever I get ranting on pricing, I want to dive deep, but that's not going to be for today. For now, actually, first I want to say thank you. Thank you for not just bringing this to me, but also for bringing it to our audience out there. There's going to be people out there listening to this and thinking, I may not be her, but I understand that situation. And you've just provided a bit of inspiration for them. Thank you for that. That takes generosity and courage. Appreciate it. Number two thing is I want you to think for a moment, and then I want you to think of 3 things you take with you from this conversation. They could be good, they can be bad, they can be things you're going to do on Wednesday, they can be things you'll never do in your life, they can be things you knew already, but now just heard in a different way, but 3 things you take with you, and then share them with us.
Okay. 3 things. Primarily, and number 1, staying true to my values. I like how that came through with the College of Extraordinary Experiences, with the way, I saw that pricing model and thought, I see what they care about, and I care about that too. So I liked how your values came through in there. 2, courageous conversations. Be willing to have those conversations about budget, which a lot of people don't love, but they're necessary. So I think leaning into that, not being afraid of it. And 3, understanding that it's not petty to talk about money. It's kind. We're doing each other a service, and so it's showing respect and care in that way.
I like that, and I think you just hit the nail on the head that so many people are afraid of talking about money, where money is this uncomfortable thing that we know needs to be settled, but we don't want to talk about it, and we want to be vague and obscure. It's like, oh, let's not be clear because we might be losing out, or they might be cheating us, or it might go wrong. And there's this fear of, I read one of these negotiation masters who said, never tell your price first. Always let them say a price first, because then if it's high, you can pressure them a little bit. And if it's low, you can pressure them a lot. And I think, to me, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying I don't like it. I like that we can talk about things and it's okay to say, hey, I need some more money for this because I have a mortgage to pay. Instead of saying, I need more money for this because I think you can afford me, or whatever it is, right? If it's something that is a conversation, both people can say, okay, I'm fine with this. I'm comfortable with this. And if they're not, then at least make it something they understand.
Absolutely.
Instead of bullshit. Bullshit is fine, but I prefer to keep it out of pricing.
I'm with you.
With that, we are now at the end of this. And to all of our listeners out there, you have heard Ashley King Nizzle. You have heard me, your host, Klaus Hoste. This has been the Innovation Coaching Podcast. Thank you for listening.